You can't time opportunity. What you have to do is be ready when the opportunity presents itself. Welcome to the Menlo Experience. I'm your host, Brad Sant, here with Kyle Bach. And we had an NFL draft here recently. I'm just jumping right into it because, it just gets me excited about football season.
It's a fun time.
What were your thoughts?
Well, my son was really mad that we made him go to bed at night and he couldn't watch the Chiefs because it was such a late pick. But you know what? I'm loving the Xavier Worthy pick.
Yeah.
Love that we traded up. Saw some video that was talking about the stats on anytime we trade with the Bills, that it always just goes really bad for the Bills.
What are the Bills doing this year, by the way?
Why would they trade that with us? That makes no sense at all.
Well, Stephon Diggs got traded. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
I'm not complaining. Great for us. So.
Yeah.
But trade Xavier Worthy.
That's exciting.
Working on the receivers.
Yeah, that's exciting. Anytime you can bring somebody in who breaks the combine record for the fastest, that's amazing.
Yeah. I think about kind of tying that to our team, and anytime you could upgrade talent or bring in somebody new that whether it's new energy, whether it's good skills or talents, makes a difference.
Finding the right person, that can fill a gap like that can be such a game changer. I mean, part of the challenge this last season is we had so many people fill in the box on Pacheco. We couldn't go long. We didn't have that threat.
Mm-hmm.
You add that threat back in, and anytime you can fill that type of a role in business, it's equally as impactful.
Well, I think it's real interesting to watch a draft and then how any team, operates with this, because it's what we try and do in business. And that's, you're not trying to find everybody that's the same exact person, right?
Yeah.
And so when we're building our teams, you try and find balance. And you get one person on the team that may bring a real strength. Then you may need a kind of position player that's going to come in and do one thing really well. And I think it's interesting just as teams evolve, that's what they spend a lot of time doing in an off season.
Yeah.
And I think that's behind the scenes what a lot of us are doing, when we talk about recruitment and all the work that goes into finding a new employee.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I think, when I think about, we've talked a lot over the last year of just resetting our foundation and really looking at a number of key roles and recruiting, marketing, and, some different business development and things like that. But then improving our processes and our strategy overall as we're looking at the business model. And, I think it is kind of the unsung part of the Chiefs that doesn't get talked about a lot. Unless you're paying attention to the Chiefs and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But Veach is a strategic genius, right? One of our core values, strategy. And, he is brilliant, and Reed, them working together on that. And we're constantly getting, multiple years in a row here of just unbelievable grades at the draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about, stepping back as a business and thinking about our strategy and taking time to actually step back, right? It's easy to get sucked into the business and work in the business all the time, right? Yeah. But taking that time to step backwards and look at the business, work on the business and think strategically. And, I think it's often that, you take a look at the quarterly goals and things like that. But, anytime we can take a time to step back and really look annually or even years out in advance of where do we want to be. And, this morning we were talking, dreaming and brainstorming about different business acquisitions and things like that could help our model 5 years from now. Right.
Yeah.
And, and anytime you can really step back and think strategically like that as a business, it then allows you, I think, to go into the 90-day windows with a whole different type of energy and focus with the 5-year plan in mind.
Yeah. I think I'm having this flashback to when I was a little kid playing soccer, and our soccer coach.
What position did you play?
Striker mostly, a little center mid, but our coach made us go watch this. It was raining, right, in practice, and so we used to practice on the Park University campus, and we went inside and watched this video on Pele.
Oh yeah,
and it was talking about, the narrator was talking about him or whatever. But anyway, what the video was talking about is that Pele would picture 5-6 steps in advance. Ball goes here, ball goes there, then down there, and then. It wasn't just my next step. It's all of the interactions. And I think that's probably what the Chiefs do well in the draft. I mean, you've got so many moving parts that you have to have all these different scenarios. If this goes that way, or, that we'll make this and then trade here and then do that. And I think that's a lot of what, at least the way I approach business too, from my vision, I just run tons of scenarios and all these different things trying to anticipate. Now you spend a lot of time for things that don't ever come to fruition.
Sure.
The more that you can kind of picture those connections, not just one step down the road, but what are the multiple steps that happen based on that chain reaction, if you will.
You get better at seeing around the corner that way, right?
Great way.
And I think that, in business, it's all about predicting what's around the corner. And, it takes all of those, playing out all those different experience or, all the different possibilities in order to, get good at seeing around the corner like that. Messi's another one that's just just amazing at that. Right. And he's constantly seeing passing lanes that nobody else is seeing. And there's one video that I can't remember who they were playing against, but it was a goal that he got, but it was his pass through 3 defenders what nobody saw coming, including the guy he was passing it to. And you can see in slow motion when you watch it, it was the reaction of that guy is like, oh, he just, this pass is on the way. But Messi, immediately as he makes that pass, is sprinting to where he knows then the next pass is going to be going towards for him to get an easy goal. And it's that type of anticipation and, reaction time to changing environments and changing situations that in business, it's that pace of play that in business we have to get better at as a team constantly. And, it's all about the speed. It's all about reaction time and anticipation of what's going to go on, what's coming up around the corner. And I'd argue that a lot of times, even when you're playing out those scenarios, which we had one of those scenarios happen recently here, it didn't go through.
Right.
And we spent a lot of time planning on it and working towards it. And in some ways you could call it a waste, but it also helped us optimize and think through, okay, how do we be ready for when this type of a deal does come through?
Right. And
so we've got plans in place and we've got, we've built the model already now. And now, as long as we hold on to that, and secure it and document it, we're ready to roll for when that does happen down the line. Whether that's 30 days from now or whether that's a year from now, we're ready to go on it.
Well, the truth is, when those things don't come through, you should be learning lessons every single time, right?
Yeah.
What are things we could have done differently? But I think there's a lot of it that you can analyze that you just find out is completely out of your control.
Yeah.
And you can do everything right in particular scenarios, and it just happens, and really nothing in your control. You didn't do anything wrong, and I think that's the frustrating part sometimes is you learn a lesson from things that are just out of your control, and maybe you just have to accept it's out of your control. But
do you have any favorite quotes on when things are out of your control, or is there anything that comes to mind on that?
Gosh, I feel like I should be having a quote right now. But
I always just like the quote that's the focus inside your boat. It's the rowing quote that it's like, you can't control the weather. You can't control what the other teams are doing. There's, in rowing, it's your team alone towards the clock.
Yeah. And,
it has nothing to do with, you're competing against other, boats, but really you can't do anything to affect them. And, and you can complain about the weather, but you can't do anything about the weather either. And so I always like the quote of just focus inside your boat.
Yep.
And, and so it's, as we think about this situation, we had a large potential customer.
Sure.
And we'd gone all the way to the finish line. And we, had to go through some grieving and things like that. And how was your feeling that day?
It was interesting as it transpired, because you could see it kind of falling apart right at the tail end. You've got to solve it looked really good and then fell apart. So for me, it was probably over the course of a few days, just kind of dealing with that.
Yeah.
And I know for me in those situations, what I want to ultimately get to is the inevitable no, right? Because as long as it looks like it's hanging on, I think then you can get yourself into some dwell time, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
But for me, I think I mentioned learning, right? So you always want to learn when those things happen. So I try and capture those quickly, understand what we could have done, and move on. I'm not a person that dwells on that a long time. Frustrating, because it certainly would have been a great opportunity, but I think getting distracted by it is ultimately worse than not getting it at all. So just bringing the focus back. We talked about it. I think we talked about needing to have a funeral for that event, and we grabbed happy hour and poured one out, and that was that. So
it's one of those funny things, because obviously I think what hurt me the most in that situation was it felt like we were the right next step. And I think that that's what's maybe sometimes in those situations, but again, it's outside of your control.
Right.
And obviously we serve students and we serve, teachers. And so when you see, yourselves as the best step for those students and teachers, to make their learning environments better, it's hard to not want that to go forward. And yet it's totally out of our control. Right.
Yeah.
And so some of those situations I think are, when that happens, there's kind of this, okay, yeah, we learn from it. How do we move on? And, and let's not, lose sleep over it. Let's move forward, as a team and how do we attack the next challenge or opportunity?
Yeah. I think one way that I look at it is, when you were frustrated, you didn't get it. That's the passion that comes out in us and who we are and wanting to be the best and driving at that and our culture to push for that. We should be pissed off when we don't get those just because we are that passionate about it. And if we're going through life and just the business and thinking, oh well, then that doesn't fit our culture, right?
Yeah.
So that's just our passion
We
coming
care.
out. People get frustrated. Yep, absolutely. And we want to do a great job. And when you can do that for somebody, it kind of
I will say
frustrating.
some highlights for me that came out of it. We got, we got to hear the stories of some of our employees, even just from a personal level, and they got to share just with some people and in some of the process. And that was just that was a really encouraging just to hear, just some of our team and hear from them on their experience of working here and being a part of the purpose that we have of serving students and teachers too. And just their stories.
I think that's a great, kind of segue to one thing I was going to talk about today, which was, recent employee engagement survey and what we're doing there. Because we do want to make it a great place and continue to improve that. What were your thoughts on that process and what we got back?
Well, we started the Gallup survey, and so the Q12 survey profile, and so we went through the official process of starting that with Gallup, and and you probably know a little bit more about Gallup as a whole as a company than I do, but they created the Q12 model, and it's really kind of the standard of employee engagement for businesses, and even when they're different organizations are comparing and talking about businesses, that's really the evaluation tool that they use a lot of times. And we got some.
Hey, we're downtown again.
Downtown music.
The sounds of the city.
Sounds of the city. Okay. Sorry, Jessica. Okay. So
we got our producer. Right here, so
Q12. Back
stay
on.
focused. Come on.
Dial it in. Okay. The Q12. Yeah. So, I mean, it was, we sent it out to our staff and we got 95% response from our staff, which was great. I may have pestered some people to, make sure that they were filling it out. Some people thought that I knew who was filling it out, which is not true.
All anonymous.
It was 100% anonymous, but when they admitted they hadn't filled it out, they did kind of tell on themselves in those situations. So Gary, sorry, Gare Bear, that's Gary's nickname, by the way. He's going to love that. So, but yeah, the Q12 survey, we got some great feedback on it. And one of the things I love about the survey is that they've got resources inside of it. So that as the survey is filled out and as we get graded on some of the different questions and things like that, it really gives us tools to focus on a few of those areas, for the next 6 months as a company and as a team. And how do we see improvement and even ask follow-up questions and have resources and additional, conversations as a leadership team, management team around those questions and how can we improve? One of our core values, improvement, is something this really sets the foundation for us to focus on some of those areas, but also get that feedback from the team on it, so that we're, has been really good feedback on it. And so excited to see, us take next steps on that and be able to really roll out and do some follow up on it. Yeah,
I'm excited. I can't wait to talk about it from our leadership team perspective and, do a lot that we can around that. I think, we've got such a great momentum on culture and want to, you mentioned the word improvement. We want to keep improving that. It's a constant quest though, right? Never stops. Always keep going. And there's always something to address.
Yeah. One of the things I was telling you about earlier is also they have an article when you log in and look at the results from the survey, they just have a bunch of resources, right? So one of the resources was talking about nationally, how employee engagement nationally is down year over year. And so the overall engagement of all the businesses that they work with, internationally, so it's across the world, but the employee engagement is down by 3% year over year from last year. And that on average of all the businesses that use their platform, that employee engagement sits around 30% in every business.
It's wild.
Which is wild. And so we were talking about, but when you think about, some of the dynamics of improving employee engagement, and as a business, how do we both improve employee satisfaction, but engagement's a whole, it's all 12 of those questions that go into it, right? And but when you think about employee engagement, what are some of the dynamics that you think of? Just from the CEO's perspective, what are things that play through in your mind?
Well, I mentioned this when we were talking earlier, but I think meaningful work is a key part of that. But as I was just hearing you, describe that or whatever, I was just sitting here reflecting. Like, I wonder, over that period of time, how satisfied do you think people are in their personal life? There's a lot that's influencing people's personal lives and social media and what you see, and then creating expectations. If you look at LinkedIn and some of those things and this concept of work, most of what you probably see is the glory stuff, right? All the good stuff. I remember when I was starting the business a little over 14 years ago, ping pong tables, pool tables, the espresso machines, all that Silicon Valley, that was the thing there. That was all the image that you saw, game rooms. And so, I think we did some of that early on. And from my perspective, I don't think it really truly changed engagement. We were chasing some of those things, but I think that's a lot of what people see, right? And so it creates this expectation of what is work, and it should be this, always fun or glorious thing. And I'm not saying that I'm generalizing, obviously, but so I think we have a little bit of a challenge of truly understanding and connecting with everyone. And here's what we're after. Here's what we're trying to do, and having a conversation around, and how can we incorporate what's important to you with our mission as an organization and the work that we have to do, and create a really great place, right? And at the end of the day, we've got to get results. That's number one, and that's one of our core values that sits at the top. So that's the focus. But how do we do that? How do we get those results? How do we make sure people are engaged? Because we know that will be better results at the end of the day. So I think it's that quest, but it's a conversational piece. It's a constant blend of trying to move in that area. Dovetailing this back to talking about the Chiefs and building a team and all that. Every person that comes on, they're adding something to the culture. They're shifting that team dynamic. And so we can't just have one conversation about this and think, oh, we've got it taken care of. And that's why we're going to, certainly use this survey on a regular basis to get kind of pulse of where that sits. And one thing I was going to ask you is, I'm curious of your perspective on the skepticism of it being anonymous.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that there is, as I was initiating out to people, there was this response when I was initiating it that it's like, well, he must know that I hadn't done this. And, it was interesting because I didn't know, obviously. No idea, right? I was just reaching out to teams about it and individuals. And, and so it was one of those things that I think that there's, I think that sometimes that skepticism, is a symptom, right, of a deeper, feeling. And so sometimes I think that there is this perception of, the leaders, they see more, or they're watching more, and I do think that there's, I think that there's a lot going on in the culture that has happened in the last handful of years. It's probably creating some skepticism towards anyone in leadership. And so we went through this COVID time where, wild things were happening by different companies, right? Like, they were tracking mouse clicks and, mouse movements, because there was this whole, and I had some experience with that. There's this whole group of people that truly believe that their employees are just out there that they're just totally stealing from them.
Right.
Like, there's a group of leadership and a group of, owners and things like that just truly believes at the core that, people are working multiple jobs and things like that. And the wild thing is actually at one of the companies that I worked at during that time period, one of the employees was working 3 jobs.
Right.
And the only way that employee was found out by, someone posting something on LinkedIn. So yeah, so there were those situations. So on both sides, there was this, kind of skepticism building. And so I think that there's some of that that's maybe still lingering around from that. And so in a workplace, in an environment, part of that employee engagement does have to feel like they trust me. They want me here. They believe in me. To be, they believe that I can do a great job at this. And part of our job as leaders is to empower and to, give the authority and give the opportunity for them to really win and succeed and feel, when you have the opportunity to, to take on projects, to take on, maybe even additional projects over what your, core foundational responsibilities are, I think it does give an opportunity for, for people to step up and succeed and really find some of that fulfillment, in some of those areas. And so I think that for us, it's our responsibility to, to make sure that we're giving them those opportunities to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's an element in my mind, which it reinforces the importance in the culture of leadership and managers providing candid feedback, right? And being clear, telling people sometimes the things that they don't want to hear.
Yeah.
So at least, in that regard, you feel like, well, they're telling me the truth, right?
Yeah.
And it's not sugar coated or it's not vague or whatever. And creating this kind of dynamic of, and again, we're after results and these sorts of things. And here's how we're going to hold people accountable to that. But being honest and ultimately in a way that shows care and that we really are caring about the person, themselves first, and then incorporating that again into the organization. And I think being transparent, being direct on some of these things kind of helps. It may hurt sometimes, but at least for me, I can rely on the information you're giving me to be accurate and sincere, even though I may not want to hear it.
Yeah. So. And I think it's two sides. There's us speaking in and needing to speak up in those times, be direct and be honest and transparent. Then there's the flip side of that. That's us listening, right? And responding to what we've heard as well, right? As leaders. And so, part of the taking the survey is, listening and, okay, now getting, some more specific information on how we can improve in those areas and then making change, and adjusting and pivoting or giving clarity to why we're not making change, right? And communicating, why, maybe some policy is the way that it is and things like that. And us realizing as leaders that we don't have it all figured out and we're trying to do the best to make this the best place to be, but, in attempting, that, making sure that we have better communication and connection with our team.
Yeah. I think we're fallible like anybody else, right? So we're going to try some things, may work, may not work.
Yeah.
But, just to your point, I think that bringing it back to the conversation and having that dialogue, and that doesn't mean we do everything that everybody's asking. It doesn't mean we can, or there may be strategic reasons we don't, but having the conversation about why and all that, I think, again, it may not be the stuff people want to hear, but hopefully feel heard and all that. And I think that's dovetailing this back to the survey. I mean, that is a great way for us to hear, in an anonymous way. I'm getting to where I fall, I can't talk again.
Yeah,
but
it's fine. We can sing Christmas.
It's a little early for that, but we get to that point, and it's really a great way for us to get that feedback. And I think that's just for me, from where I sit, as as a leader of the organization, want to drive that, really home to our organization that we're listened to that. We've talked about it, and in a really nerdy, odd way, you and I were pretty excited to get those results and see what they say, because that gives us the insight that we can use to go after and try and improve these things. So I was glad to see we had 95%, and kudos to you for pushing on that. But I was glad to have our participation of our staff at that level.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, I was proud of them for that.
So it's springtime. It's kind of new life for a lot of things, but our customer base is slowing down. We're picking up. What's your thoughts heading into spring and kind of our business cycle and what you've learned? I mean, you're about 10 months here now, so what have you learned about the cycle, what it takes and all that we need to do to serve our clients? Yeah,
I love seeing, I think inside of the company, it really seems like we have multiple different cycles going on. So just while we have one team kind of winding down a little bit with the school year, that primarily being our customer base, we've got that season winding down or coming to the end of testing and coming to the end of the year, and so we're helping prep kind of our customers on getting ready for the summer and working with teachers and things like that. But then we have a lot of our installations and a lot of our IT work and things like that for that team that is really ramping up and getting into the crazy time. And then we've got our help desk that's really winding down, that jumps into projects and into implementations and things like that over the summer. But they're gearing up before their wild season, which is the fall, right? And so lots of different movements on different parts. But I think, as we're looking at the summer, it's, we're really asking the question and even talking with our teams about, in the midst of seasonal change, how do you keep, the pressure on, and yet also allow for people to get some rest, when they're going into a crazy season? I took a day off this last week and took a weekend away, and things like that, just to kind of reset, and get refreshed. And man, I can feel it at the beginning of this week that I'm just in a better headspace,
Sure.
dreaming on things and thinking of things. So how do we provide that environment for our team to be able to get refreshed before back to school season for our help desk, but also, keep the pressure on, to improve and to get better and to focus, on constantly upping our game and expectations on ourselves.
Yep.
And so it is an interesting balance because, I would say in some businesses, you've really got a lot more, unity around the seasonality inside the business. But I would say we have maybe 3 different cycles, inside of one business model, which is, I think, just really unique.
Yeah, it is an interesting perspective because it's all dynamic throughout the organization.
Yeah.
And what I think is great too, and the teams that are winding down a lot of times will step up and go shift work and we'll back up our other teams. And so organizationally, I think it's really great in these transitional times to see the teams helping each other out, kind of stepping outside of their kind of main purview and moving over to the other side. So
there's a lot of teamwork going on right now, which is really fun to see and see that cross the different, pillars inside of the company.
What's the biggest concern on your radar, would you say?
Ooh, biggest concern on my radar. I think the biggest concern is, we still are just facing some different hiring situations. And there's probably just a couple of balls up in the air that we've kind of got, inside of the culture index. We talk about it being the AD conflict, right?
Yep.
We got the gas pedal down, but we got the brake down at the same time on some things. And so I think that's one of the challenges right now that we're facing, with hiring and some different, projects that are up in the air that, some potential new customers that are coming on and things like that, it's, but, just trying to figure out, okay, so what's the appropriate timing on that? And, as you were talking about earlier, talking about the different dynamics and strategic planning and things like that and thinking 4 steps down the road. I think the biggest challenge, at least for me in my head right now, is thinking through, there's 5 steps down the road, but we've a little bit got the brake and the gas down right now. And so it's, as a business trying to figure out how do we play chess in those situations as opposed to playing checkers, right?
Yep. It's a constant fight.
Yeah.
Always trying to figure that out. But, I think we may have talked about this on a podcast before, but as I sit here and think about that, we talked a little bit about this with this last deal that didn't go through, but whether you're a business or in your personal life or entrepreneur, you can't time opportunity. It just doesn't happen that way. What you have to do is be ready when the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah.
And so I think, that is what I've seen our organization do, something I drive for, which is constantly trying to be prepared and anticipate, right? You're trying to anticipate all those moves so you can be ready when that opportunity shows up.
Yeah.
Because the worst possible thing would be to have a great opportunity right in front of you and you're not ready to take advantage of it. So I think, as we move into the summer, that's a lot of opportunity for us to train our employees, be ready for all the things going into back to school, keep our eyes open. And what I can tell you I've seen over and over and over in this business is June, July, we're going to have opportunities fall in our lap that just for timing based, that our customers need our help and we need to be able to rise to that occasion. So
be ready to take the break off.
We should always have the break off if you're in my head, but
I know. Yeah.
So I got that Mario Andretti quote in there.
That's right.
If everything's under control, you're not going fast enough. So let's take that break off and
the need for speed.
That's right. But Thanks for joining us today. This has been the Menlo Experience. We'll see you next time.